I'm Ed Donahue.
President Trump has signed a massive $867 billion farm bill, reauthorizes agriculture and conservation programs. Also, the Agriculture Department has announced plans to tighten work requirements for recipients of government food aid. More on these stories at townhall.com.
The following is an America Matters media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
Hello and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power, Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. My name is Brendan Trainor. I am your co-host today with Leland, Faegre, and Jennifer Green is visiting relatives and out of state and will not be here today. So we have a lot to talk about. Some people think that Donald J. Trump, our president, is the master of chaos. And if you look at all the exploding heads in Washington, D.C., I think that's a correct statement.
You might make that assumption, and it's well deserved, and he intentionally considered all of this during the campaign, so it shouldn't come as any surprise to anyone.
No, it shouldn't. You're absolutely right, but it's interesting that he's pulling out of Syria, which is something that we have long argued for. And he's at least drawing down by 50% in Afghanistan, and that may go further as well. So there's a lot to cheer about as peace is breaking out over Christmas.
Although they're not cheering in the establishment.
No, definitely not.
I hesitate to say where this is going, but it's clear that the challenge has just begun. I think we've just begun this defense of our positions through our current administration, through Donald Trump.
Yeah. And, there's always the chance he'll backtrack because he is very volatile, but it seems to me that since Mattis is resigning, that is the end point of most of the resistance, and all they can do now is complain and protest that it's the evil of the world, and the end of the world as we know it, and the country is in a tailspin. That was another phrase I heard.
And the mood over at the Pentagon over the last few days, as it's been described by some of the media pundits, and how dark it was. So they knew it was coming. In fact, as I mentioned on this program a couple of weeks ago, Mattis himself had said that a drawing down the forces in Afghanistan was pending, which was something that was definitely on the table. So now we're watching it unfold.
Yes, and we're watching and we're cheering. We're back on the Trump train.
I was never off of it. I always believed that he was the libertarian in the room. And a lot of libertarians didn't get it. I'm not sure why, because they weren't listening to him or didn't trust that he was telling the truth when he said certain things. His characterization of him as a liar has always inflamed me. I don't see it.
Right.
What's he lied about?
No, I don't.
His personal life is not on the table here.
Right. Well, he exaggerates. I mean, a couple of weeks ago he was saying that Assad killed 1 million people. And,
he shoots from the hip instinctively, but it doesn't mean he's wrong about specifics of certain things. But his instincts are right.
Yes, I agree.
And so we have to give him credit for that and dismiss the relevancy of those who would nitpick the proportionality of some of these things themselves.
Yeah.
Because it's not good.
And, our position in Syria was just completely untenable, and a lot of people like Secretary of Defense Mattis because of his nickname, Mad Dog, but let's face it, he got that nickname by leveling Fallujah during the Iraq War, and killing many people.
Where we shouldn't have been in the first place.
Right. And we have also leveled Mosul, and we've also leveled Raqqa, and yet we blame Assad and say that Assad is the one creating war crimes in Syria, when, as usual, it's mostly ourselves that have done the war crimes over there.
Because it's almost by default, because we're asked to join those expeditions, and when we do, we have the muscle to accomplish these ends. And so it really is, it's something that we really have to be thinking about. Any kind of military intervention overseas has a consequence of blowback.
Oh yeah.
And it will invariably happen. So we need to attenuate all of these natural inclinations to be the cock of the world, the kings of the world. And I think this is why the people who are war weary at this point decided that Donald Trump was their guy. I know I did. He was the libertarian in the room.
Yeah, and for me it was a different. I didn't know if he was the libertarian in the room, but I understood that what he was saying was largely libertarian. I mean, he's still too law and order in some respects for me, too authoritarian Republican in some respects. But the idea that he campaigned on, saying that, he confronted Jeb Bush and said that his brother lied, and to get us into the Iraq War. I mean, a statement like that cannot go unremarked upon by a non-interventionist.
Absolutely, and there was certainly a lot of raised eyebrows during the debate season in 2016.
Yes.
When he brought all of these subjects up. Of course, they laughed him off and said he could never even be a candidate, much less become president of the United States. And as it got closer and closer, that's when the Barack Obama administration decided to use the intelligence apparatus to go after him. And that's a whole other side, a whole other discussion. But this is how we got to Mueller.
Yeah. Yeah, when he fired Comey, that's how we got to Mueller. And Comey was on Capitol Hill again, making a fool out of himself once more. And
he sure does embarrass himself, doesn't he?
Yes, he sure.
Oh my gosh. And he doesn't seem to realize that, or there's just too much at stake. I think it's the latter. There's just too much at stake. He is the front line of defense for Barack Obama, because after this scandal that we're witnessing, the manufactured crisis of going after Trump was at the behest of protecting Hillary Clinton through the President of the United States, Barack Obama.
Exactly.
This is Obama. So that's what it needs to be described as.
And when we come back, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about Syria. For example, a lot of people don't realize that one faction of the army was definitely for what Donald Trump did, and that was Eurocom. As you know, the U.S. Army divides, the Pentagon divides the world into different coms. And Eurocom is, Europe, and it includes Turkey, whereas CENTCOM is the part of the Pentagon that Mattis comes from, involves the Middle East. And so what happened really is that Eurocom, under General Curtis Scaparotti, actually helped influence Trump to pull the trigger. And we'll talk about that when we come back from break.
The Butcher's Kitchen Barbecue invite your family in for the best wood-fired, slow-cooked barbecue rotisserie and open charcoal.
Join me Saturdays, 10 to noon, here on America Matters.
Unable to listen to the whole show? A recording of today's program will be available later today. Visit americamatters.us and click on the podcast link. Now, back to the show.
Hello and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power, Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. My name is Brendan Trainor. I am your co-host today with Leland Faegre, and we're available every Friday from 9 to 10 in the morning, AM 1180. America Matters Media streaming also at www.americamatters.us. You can call us at 844-790-TALK. And that's 844-790-8255, or text us at 775-237-2266. And we were talking a little bit about how this did not come out of the blue, Donald Trump's decision to withdraw troops from Syria. Not only did he talk about it during his campaign, but it has been brought up at several points. And what really, I think, tipped Trump into making the final decision, despite the objections of all his advisors that he has appointed, is that talks by the commander of Eurocom, General Curtis Scaparotti, who is extremely worried that Turkey was going to pull out of NATO and join up more solidly with the Russia, China, Iran axis.
And apparently, Turkey was contemplating an attack, a military attack.
Oh yes, more than contemplating. They were gathering troops at the border.
Into the Kurdish region, and of course we have troops amongst them. Probably intelligence operations more than anything. But, that clearly was... he pretty much drew the line in the sand, because this is what I'm going to do.
Yes. He's afraid that the Kurds will, try to create a new state carved out of Turkey and also Iran.
Which they've always wanted.
And Iraq, which they've always wanted, exactly. And the Kurds were the darlings of the... those who agreed with the wars in Iraq and Syria against ISIS, because it was felt that they were good soldiers, that they had women fighting in their military. That was always a positive thing in Washington, D.C. But the Kurds made some very strategic blunders, and they kind of cut themselves off from their victory. First of all, by calling an election in Iraq that they lost badly, and then by refusing in one of the center points that Turkey did already attack them on was the Idlib province, and they could have asked Assad for help, and they could have said that they would rejoin the Syrian government. Instead, they decided to fight Turkey, and they were badly beaten in that encounter. So they are, unfortunately, they're going to be another one of those groups that we have embraced as partners in our military adventures that is going to suffer somewhat from what becoming our partner.
Well, we were forced to choose between Turkey, and there's 80 million people there.
Yes.
And the second largest army in NATO.
Yes.
It's described as Captain Trainor described it, the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus entrance to the Black Sea. So, I mean, there are always casualties in the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly.
And that's what we're experiencing now.
Yes. And so a lot of the Kurds, leadership of the Kurdish forces will probably flee to their stronghold in Iraq. And the remaining Kurds, some of them may indeed suffer. Turkey hopefully can be restrained by Russia and Syria from actually attacking across the border. And the Syria, Damascus, will offer the Kurds to come into the fold, join up with the Syrian army, and stop trying to be create this independent statelet. And some of them will take them up on that.
And the military-industrial complex will be rewarded handsomely by arms purchases from everyone. So everybody wins in that sense except the Kurds, it seems like.
Yes, Erdogan has promised, I don't know whether he's not going to buy the Russian S-400 defense system, but he's apparently, according to news reports, he's promised to buy more Patriot anti-missiles.
I'm sure that was a condition.
Yes.
What happened.
Yeah, Donald has to see some money coming in, right?
The businessman first.
Yes.
Okay. That's the deal.
Okay. And so that is what's going on now. And the idea that, these people keep thinking that America was the primary force in defeating ISIS in Syria. Well, we had a large role to play in Iraq, but we've been very minimally engaged against ISIS in Syria, if the truth be told. Mm-hmm. There have been reports showing on independent news sites that the ISIS troops and the American troops seem to coexist very well together. And it was the Kurds, in fact, that after the destruction of Raqqa, the city in Syria, that allowed the ISIS troops to leave with all of their automatic weapons and ammunition, which is not what Syria does. Syria only allows them to bring either a pistol or a rifle and one clip of ammo when they leave. So the idea that we have been the most effective agent there is kind of like saying America won the war in Europe in World War II, and actually, of course, Russia was the victor there, and we only helped out in the Italian and French campaigns.
As Yalta revealed.
Yeah. So
we won nothing.
Yes, exactly. So there we have it. We're finally going to leave Syria, and we will see if chaos reigns, according to people like Little Marco Rubio.
Well, they're lining up. It's Ben Sass. It's, of course, John Bolton and his CFR wing of the Republican Party. There's a whole bunch of people that are fit to be tied about this development.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's what's so fun to watch.
Release the Kraken.
Yeah. It's going to be very fun to watch all of these developments for sure. The Buchanan article is really interesting. If anyone goes out there to look for it, and he has some interesting things to say. I don't know how he knows, for example, that he says Trump told Erdogan we would take a look at extraditing the Muslim cleric Fethullah Gulen, whom everyone says instigated the 2016 coup attempt that was to end in Erdogan's assassination. That was going to be the end result. I remember watching that intensely from Montana at the time. It was a very interesting episode of American foreign policy. It wasn't as clearly obvious that the CFR had its imprimatur on that event, but you can't help but wonder that they did.
Oh yeah, and the whole point was that Erdogan still does not fully trust the United States because he thinks the United States are elements within the United States government are the ones behind the attempted coup. And it was Russia, remember, Vladimir Putin, who warned him. And apparently he was on his way to his vacation home, but Putin warned him and he stopped, and the vacation home was bombed. So that's one reason why he's been courting Russia. And Erdogan, I'm sure, will continue to play both sides against the middle. He wants what is best for Turkey, in his point of view. So he's not going to fully jump into the NATO's camp. He's not going to fully jump into the Russian, Chinese, Iran camp either. He's going to play both sides and see what he can get for Turkey.
And we haven't talked about Netanyahu, because he had to have been signaled before this happened.
Oh yeah. We don't do anything without running it by Bibi.
No. So what was his? What did he sign off on? In his own protection or his own sovereign role in the region. And it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out.
Right.
And when he rears his head, because he hasn't even acknowledged it yet, I think. There's been no Israeli component to this that I've heard.
No, I haven't seen anything. And he's got to be worried about the Golan Heights, because once things settle down in Syria, if Syria gets its hands on the oil fields that the Kurds had taken over, and can use the money to rebuild Syria, after some point in time, there's going to be more discussion about the Golan Heights, which, according to the UN resolutions, it's an illegal occupation by Israel. And so there was some hope when things were riding high that the U.S. would recognize Israel's control of the Golan Heights in some way or another. I don't know whether that's going to happen. That would be another stroke of chaos if it does happen. But so we'll just have to wait and see. But now that the Russians have fortified the Syrian air defense with S-300 and Panzer-2 anti-missile forces, Israel will pay a much higher price for anything it tries to do in Syria. And the Hezbollah has now been battle-hardened. They've been rotating their militia in and out of Syria now for 7 years, and they have been fortified apparently with more missiles from Iran, and they are not. Lebanon is certainly not an easy target. In fact, the Hezbollah is practically daring Israel to invade them. So it's going to be interesting to see which direction the Zionists and Israel go.
Well, we've done enough damage in the region, and I think at the end of the day, or at the end of the discussion, and it looks like it's just beginning, but at the end of the discussion, that's really what it comes down to. We have destroyed the region at the behest of Zbigniew Brzezinski's scheme. It was to get involved in that area going back to about 1979, when he was director of the Trilateral Commission, and also became National Security Advisor to Carter in that trilateral age that is still there, even though the players are, some of whom are no longer with us, but they are still out there, and the policies within the intelligence apparatus of the elite is still very much at play. So it will be interesting to see how all of this plays out, but it can't be any worse than what we've already seen play out thus far.
That's right. We have reason to be hopeful this Christmas.
Getting to the top is more than an engaging memoir. It's a proof of success.
This is America Matters Media on AM 1180 KCKQ, a Lotus broadcast station. The power of radio since 1967.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now, back to the show.
Hello and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power. My name is Brendan Trainor. I'm your co-host today with Leland Faegre. And before we start our third section here, let's give a shout out to our host, Reno Computer Services. Reno Computer Services is Reno's premier IT provider for computer repair, malware removal, and data recovery. They perform routine maintenance and they protect your PCs against invasive viruses. And you can call Reno Computer Services at 775-737-4400 or renocomputerservices.com. And we were talking again about the pullout from Syria, but now the other thing that is in the news and causing a good deal of heads to explode in Washington is the shutdown, the potential shutdown of the government over whether Donald Trump will get his wall. And you saw something in Drudge about that?
No, unrelated. Just popped up on Drudge now that Justice Ginsburg has cancerous growths removed from her lungs. So there's going to be another vacancy on the Supreme Court.
Oh, wow.
So that's a major development. And you think it's exciting in D.C. today. Just wait till that gets around.
Yes.
Another Trump appointee to the Supreme Court. Oh, this couldn't be any more beautiful, isn't it?
No.
It's just neat. This is really something to watch. Notwithstanding her demise, this is really something to watch and play out. But anyway, going back to the wall. Yeah. We wanted to. Yeah, well, it looks like he's determined for this to continue to build along our shared border. So he's going to get what he wants. It will probably incrementally accomplish, but he's not giving up on it.
No, he's not. And you know, I don't think it's going to make as much of a difference as he claims. I think it's the fact is that walls don't generally work. Everybody points to Israel and says that the Israeli wall works, like Tucker Carlson when I say everybody. But you know, that's something that bothers me, that the longer we are involved with Israel, the more we become like Israel. I mean, we're talking about walls and we're talking about shooting demonstrators for a while. There are kids that are throwing rocks like Israel has done. So it's not a healthy situation. It's not really American. But the fact is that we are in different times, and I think to give him $5 billion for a wall, I mean, you could take, that's a drop in the bucket, or what they call a rounding error in Washington. I mean, you could take it from the farm bill that they just passed, which was, really, except for the legalization of hemp, which was just a giveaway to
more subsidies. More subsidies. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And subsidies, people don't realize how subsidies can cause immigration. For example, the pressure on Mexican farmers has been caused in causing waves of immigration in the past was caused by dumping corn into the Mexican market because of the subsidies on corn and ethanol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the interference of the state into the economy, into laissez-faire economics, has consequences that are not easily seen right away in many cases. But they do have an effect over the long haul, and we've seen that kind of thing wherever it happens, wherever government intervenes.
Yeah, and those are all unintended consequences, and the rule is, as Ludwig von Mises says, whenever government intervenes, there are unintended consequences, which cause calls for more government, and which results in more unintended consequences, and a constant loss of freedom goes on. So, yes, but getting back to this, one of the things that could be a game changer is requiring the asylum seekers to wait in Mexico if that is not challenged in the courts, and that is allowed to stand, and that could be a big game changer.
Well, I expect it will be challenged.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's already been an initial challenge from those who came up during the caravan episode. But yeah, I think that in the long run, the interference of the state has played a role in the immigration crisis. It isn't always an economic interference; sometimes it's a political one. Look at the migrant crisis in Europe. That was the intervention of the United States into Syria. I mean, the consequences there are just catastrophic.
Yeah, and interesting to read about Le Gilet Jaune, the yellow jackets in France, that they are against mass migration, but they are also vocal that they are against French interventions in northern Africa. And so we should couple our response to the mass immigration in the same way, except perhaps for a few sound bites from the Geraldo Rivera, I really haven't seen much about. I mean, we are now going to have to, as we lose out in Eurasia, and we're no longer going to be the dominant player in Eurasia and the Middle East, we are right, and it is right and proper, that we turn our attention to our own hemisphere. But how are we going to have relations in our own hemisphere?
Well, as Hillary Clinton, in a speech in Brazil back in 2016, said she wants a hemispheric, borderless part of the world. So that's where all of this comes from. And, you know, when she speaks, those beneath her, those in the political class underneath her, understand what she's saying by that. She doesn't have to address uniquely or specifically that she's talking about a proper rural government and such. It's understood, you know, it's sort of a language that some of us get.
Yeah.
And so when that speech occurred in 2016, she made it clear that she was on board to a borderless hemisphere. And that's what we're facing right now with opposition from Trump and the American people.
And I agree that we should oppose that. I don't believe that we should have borderless, because it encourages, as long as it encourages government subsidization, and that is what people are angry about. I mean, if you're in France and you can barely afford an apartment, but you see massive immigration and the immigrants getting rental subsidies, you're going to be upset. And it's the same in America. The elements of our working class are upset because they believe that not general rights, property rights, but extra rights, special rights are being granted to some of the immigrants, and so that has caused the backlash against immigration. But my real concern is, how are we going to address our relations with our countries in Central and South America? For example, we have done regime change in Honduras at least twice over the last few years, and nobody in America knows about it. And we have now, Dalton gave a speech in which he tried to create a new axis of evil, like George Bush did with Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua.
It's the same formula, that's all they know.
Yes. You know, when everything looks, when all the government has is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
And so we've got these two authoritarian 19th century political parties that are just playing over and over again variations of the same policy and expecting different results.
I'm not sure they even expect different results, because the objective here is their authoritarian New World Order. And so they're going to play it out even if it doesn't work in many cases. Just because they have another way to get there. But we just never get smart enough as Americans to recognize it when we see it in Ukraine. As you mentioned, in Honduras. I mean, these are examples of CIA meddling. And this is the kind of thing that the deep state is committed to for the objective of accomplishing that end, which is a supranational order, a new world order.
And yeah, that pretty much sums it up there, Leland. I mean, there are now reports that there is a right-wing so-called populist elected in Brazil. We don't know how that's going to play out because Brazil is a member of the BRICS, has close relations with Russia and China, but he is supposedly a Trump fanatic. But what does that mean? Does that mean he's a John Bolton?
He's an aficionado.
Yeah, aficionado. And there are reports that I'm seeing that we are blocking Venezuelans from returning to their country. That many of them now feel that well, first of all, there probably aren't as many good jobs in Colombia and Brazil as they thought there were when they fled Venezuela, but now they want to go back, and we're preventing them from going back.
Where did you see that? I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I can't tell you exactly where I've seen it because I read so many different sources, but it is something to look at, and because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And sure, Maduro is a socialist, and he's bad in his own country, but does that mean we should invade him or start a proxy war to replace him?
Well, this brings up Ron Paul's objection to a border wall, since that's what we're talking about. So hopefully that is the subject of this segment of the show, and that was that it also keeps us from getting out of that.
Oh yeah.
And so in the case of Venezuela, had there been anything like that, those who wanted to return couldn't. So it has also that consequence, and it's a good one. It's a good point. I mean, I remember when Ron Paul brought that up in the presidential debate in 2012. Remarkable. And you see this with respect to the Republican Party. As we talked before the show, the exoskeleton role that Trump is now sort of been signing on to as Ron Paul did. He's taken his paradigm of laissez-faire world, the political world, and brought it into the rank and file of the Republican Party, and they're enjoying it. They're seeing it as something refreshing, which is why he's president of the United States.
Yes.
So, I mean, it isn't exactly mysterious how he got there. He's very attractive because he appeals to the instincts of the American people.
Yeah, and he's much more loud and controversial than Dr. Paul was.
Well, yeah, he's much more entertaining, that's for sure.
Candy 711. Give me candy.
This is America Matters Media on AM 1180 KCKQ, a Lotus broadcast station, the power of radio since 1967.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now, back to the show.
Hello, and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power, Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. I am your host, Brendan Trainor, and your co-host today is Leland Faegre. And we were talking about the exoskeleton of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Can you define that a little bit better?
Well, I think Ron Paul mastered it. He realized that the party needed direction, and the Libertarian Party wasn't going to give him that direction. So as you see animals, he just took over the empty shell. And you see that now the effect of that development has been that we have a neo-libertarian in the Oval Office. And I think it's been an extraordinary thing to do. I can't thank Ron Paul more than his vision of how to take over a party and to lead it in the proper direction, because that's what we're witnessing right now.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, Donald Trump is a quasi-libertarian, or is libertarian on more issues than not, I would say.
Well, I think, the thing of it is that the wheels were coming off. This country was bleeding arterially, and it had to be triaged. And that's what Trump's role is to stop the bleeding first. And then we can finesse the finer points of libertarianism as we go forward. But that's where we were when 2016 unfolded before us. And he took it the bull by the horns, quite literally, and he's been watching this for years. I mean, as we talked before the show, it really is Pat Buchanan's platform that he adopted in a much more skillful manner, a more flamboyant manner.
Yeah.
And took us to this point.
Yeah, and he, of course, had his whole television career to propel him into the public, eye,
Yeah.
more so than Pat did.
That's right.
Exactly. So, yeah, and it's, now that we are finally getting some movement on the war issue and the non-interventionist issue that many people always claimed Donald was non-interventionist, and unfortunately we hadn't seen all of that come to fruit, and especially with all the neocons that he appointed to be his advisors. Now, this McCluskey, is that his name, the new chief of staff, Mike?
The former Office of Management and Budget.
Well, I think he's still going to keep that job, at least initially.
Did he take both of them?
He must be a dynamo because he's juggling all these jobs.
When he speaks, he's quite tuned in. Yeah.
Well, that's a good sign because he is basically a non-interventionist type of libertarian. So he finally appointed somebody to his cabinet that maybe is to what we would like.
I think we talked about this before. I think he had to sort of get along when he first got there, and now he doesn't have to do that. In fact, he can't afford to do it anymore.
Yeah.
So he is now playing his hand, his cards that he has under his sleeve, and we're watching them unfold. This is an extraordinary thing to see. As if we didn't have enough to celebrate at this time of the year.
Yes.
We're seeing troops come home. So it's a really, really interesting thing.
Yes, and so I'm glad that I pulled the lever for him, and I think a lot of his base is glad, but he has to get this whole wall thing resolved, and he is willing to shut down the government, and oh my gosh, the cries from Washington about shutting down the government.
When only 17% of the government actually shuts down?
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, the checks go out, you have to take the trash to the trash can if you go to a national park and there's nobody there to clean it up for you. That's about it. There's no effect at all.
Yeah. The IRS was shut down.
Yeah. Well, that's also a good thing.
People are really upset about that.
Yeah. But going back to the Libertarian Party and its roots, as we were talking about that before the show, and David Nolan's living room, whatever thermonuclear strategy was to effectively draw from both parties. And it just never had the intended effect. And I think that's why Ron Paul, at least as recently as the turn of the century, but probably before, realized there was no vehicle there. I mean, all those guys, all of the early presidential candidates were masterful. They really were extraordinary candidates, leading up to 96 and 2000. But after that, the party just peeled off. It just didn't have any, there's even socialists in the Libertarian Party.